If you know the B-52s, you probably know them from one of two songs: the surreal sea life themed post-punk of Rock Lobster from 1978, or the raucous permanent karaoke staple Love Shack a decade later. Emerging during the apex of New York punk, the B-52s had the look of a retro future that never came: sky-high beehive wigs and primary colour polyester. And they sounded as if Dick Dale, the Shangri-Las, and Edward Lear formed a band after getting really into Yoko Ono. They gave off an air of novelty, billed themselves as the ultimate party band, and yet their influence on the realm of alternative rock is staggering. Kitsch and queer icons in equal measure. This is why the B-52s are more important than you think. The B-52s were 5 underpaid misfits who met in Athens, Georgia in the mid-70s, sharing a desire to look outrageous and dance. Formerly from New Jersey, Kate Pearson had come to Athens with her husband, an Englishman she had met while travelling Europe, and lived on a farm tending goats and working a paste-up job at a local paper for a few years before getting divorced. Another New Jersey expat, Fred Snyder, had dropped out of a forestry degree and was now a waiter at a vegetarian restaurant. Cindy Wilson was a waitress at a Whirly Q luncheonette, located inside a department store. Her brother, Ricky Wilson, and his friend, Keith Strickland, hauled bags at the bus station. After a year or so of hanging out, dancing to James Brown, and crashing house parties, one night they jointly splurged on a flaming volcano, a gigantic, particularly potent rum cocktail they found on the menu of a Chinese restaurant. After kicking out time spirited by too much alcohol, the 5 ended up jamming at a friend's house, with the idea dawning on them that they should form a band. Having 3 front people, straight away they stood out. The snarled, deadpan talk singing of Snyder, the celestial harmonies of Kate Pearson, and the ricocheting sass and shrieks of Cindy Wilson. This then was powered by Strickland on drums and Ricky on guitar. Musically, as a group, they were listening to and drawing from dance music, James Brown and Motown. But also more eclectic fare. At the time, Athens was not a cultural hub. It was a farmer's town that happened to have a college. Their first show on Valentine's Day 1977 was at a friend's house party. We came out of a very tiny community of artists, but there wasn't a music scene at all. It was a very liberal group of people we were friendly with, gay and straight. Nightlife just entailed someone throwing a party and there being a keg out on the front porch. Everyone dressed up crazy, and we all listened to R&B, since that was the best music for dancing. Our initial inspiration for the band was just to create something for our friends, and as a way to entertain ourselves. We had no money, and a lot of free time. Their look too was immediately striking. Lacking funds, the band would raid second-hand stores for clothes, acquiring retro fashions that style forgot, anything to make each other laugh. For the men, it was clashing polyester and seersucker suits. For the women, 60s day-glow miniskirts. Additionally, the women accumulated a collection of vintage hairpieces, including towering beehive wigs that they wore on stage, and lent the band its name. The B-52 being southern slang for the hairstyle, due to its similarity to its namesake bomber's nose cone. It was cheap and available, not glamorous. We would pile wigs on our heads, and put a high heel on top. We were very influenced by Fellini. It was also recycling American pop culture, taking it to ridiculous extremes. Not that we sat down and philosophized about it. We just grabbed wigs and stuck them on our heads. By the end of 1977, they were looking for shows outside Georgia. In New York, bands like Television, Ramones, Blondie, and Talking Heads were making similarly cool, upcycled versions of rock and roll. And the B-52s wanted in. Making the 12-hour drive up in December, they supplied rehearsal tapes to CBGB's and Max's Kansas City. The latter gave them a Monday night audition spot, their first professional show. They were just excited to play somewhere the Velvet Underground used to play. Got $17 for the night, but got called back for a second gig. By their third time there, they were headlining. And not only that, but they were compelling the po-faced leather-clad scenesters to crack a smile and dance. So they kept coming back. There was a real dynamic between all the bands on the scene, and everybody was really encouraging. I remember this little dive restaurant near CBGB's, and after our shows we would hang out there with Brian Eno and Richard Hell. William Burroughs was there one night too. Later, before we released a single, Lux Interior of the Cramps told us, "You gotta put out Rock Lobster." There was this sort of innocence we had. We're just doing this for art. Taking on board Lux Interior's suggestion, and with the financial backing of Danny Beard of DB Records, in February 1978, the B-52s went into Stone Mountain Studios in Atlanta and recorded their first single. Rock Lobster is the kind of unimaginable debut that no one but the B-52s could have concocted, and it all started with Ricky Wilson's twangy opening riff. Like the Wigs and Fashion, they knew it was a winner because they thought it was hilarious.
I remember Ricky, Cindy lived in a house together, and I came over one afternoon and Ricky was sitting on the edge of the bed with a guitar and he was laughing. And I was going, "What's so funny?" I had walked in and he said, "What's so funny?" And he said, "I just came up with the most stupid guitar riff you've ever heard." And I said, "Well, let's hear it." And he goes, "No, no, 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 no."
The way Ricky Wilson played guitar was unlike most. He would not only utilize idiosyncratic open tunings, but he removed the middle strings from his guitars, leaving him 2 low strings and 2 high. In practice, this meant he could play off himself, bassist and guitarist as one.
Rock, rock, Rock Lobster.
The circular Rock Lobster riff is him picking away at his bassier strings, resulting in something midway between the Peter Gunn theme and John Barry's score for the 1960 exploitation film Beat Girl. Coming into the chorus, Ricky increases the pace, recalling the surf guitar of Dick Dale. And though what part is the chorus is up for debate, Rock Lobster isn't really built like a pop song. It has movements rather than verses or choruses. It's punky in its musical economy, drums, guitar, and Pearson's Farisa organ. But progressive rock in its complex structure, its ever-shifting sections hewn from hours of rehearsal and improvisation. Meanwhile, Fred Snyder had frequented a low-rent discotheque that provoked a fitting title for this surf punk odyssey. I was at this club in Atlanta called 2001 Disco when we were starting the band, and it was pretty empty. But instead of a good light show, they just showed slides of puppies and babies and cooked lobsters on a grill. It made no sense. It was a gay disco. And I just thought, wow, well, rock this, rock that, Rock Lobster.
Someone reached in and grabbed it. It was a Rock Lobster.
From this came Snyder's surrealist, aquatic scenario. It was another 60s throwback to the cheap, teen-targeted Sun and Fun movies like 1963's Beach Party.
We're gonna ride the surf. Yeah, and that ain't all.
We were at the beach. Everybody had matching towels.
Snyder monster mashed this up with the absurdist poetry of Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll, resulting in a topsy-turvy roll call of retro dance moves.
Everybody's rocking. Everybody's broken. Twisting around the fire, having fun.
And increasingly dangerous sounding sea life.
There goes a manta ray. Here comes a dogfish. Chased by a catfish.
But also with sly nods to gender role reversal.
Boys in bikinis. Girls in surfboards.
Combating but complementing Snyder's oddball storytelling are the dueling vocal splatters of Cindy and Pearson.
We were at a party. His earlobe fell in the deep. Someone reached in and grabbed it.
Starting off as bizarro mirrors of doo-wop harmonies, by the end they are impersonating the creatures as best they can, undeniably wacky, but discordant and confrontational.
In walked a blowfish. There flies a ski robin. Here comes a horny crab.
While other artists had previously replicated animal sounds for pop hits, no one had done so as aggressively, shrieking, squawking, and otherwise onomatopoeing.
There goes a narwhal. Here comes a bikini whale.
Their main calling point for this was Yoko Ono. Again, something no one else at the time was thinking of assimilating. We incorporated some Onoisms in our fish sound. She was really an inspiration to us. We were into Yoko genuinely. So that was like a homage to Yoko. It was just all out of jamming, because nobody would sit down and go, hey, let's add Yoko Ono fish sounds.
Lobster. Lobster.
Rock Lobster was released as a single in April 1978, soon selling out 2,000 copies and furthering their notoriety, gaining attention as far away as the UK. In New York, their legend continued to bloom, until suddenly they were the name on every hipster's lips. At their debut at New York club The Hurrah, they glanced out the window to see a line of people around the block, and they were taken aback that they were waiting for them, trying to get into their show. In this wave of B-52's appreciation, they got signed to Warner Brothers imprint, Reprise in the US, and Island in the UK, and recorded their debut album in the Bahamas with Island head Chris Blackwell. There's Chris in a captain's hat. He put his feet up on the console, lit a big spliff, and said, I just want you to sound like you sound. We sounded so thin and sparse, but that captured what was unique about us. It was the best decision production-wise ever. The self-titled album showcased the sweaty, silly, fruging, twisting essence of the B-52's live show. Opener Planet Claire was the Peter Gunn theme meets Telstar, an introduction to the B-movie sci-fi that pervades their work, as Pearson harmonizes on an imagined Fellini score. Former Rock Lobster flip 52 Girls is a spare, nervy list of various women's names. Danced this mess around doing the tears on the dance floor thing 30 years before Robin, but with added Cindy-led fury. And Rock Lobster in its superior album form had grown 2 minutes, now less frantic and more ambitious in its weirdness. But even weirder was with the July 1979 release of the album, they acquired John Lennon as a fan. And despite what Paul McCartney will tell you, Rock Lobster got him back in the studio for the first time in 5 years. The B-52s being influenced by Yoko Ono got Lennon to record what would be his last album, Double Fantasy, feeling that the world was now ready for his wife's eccentric vocals.
I went to a disco for the first time since 1967 when I was in Bermuda just before we made this album. And I went there, and upstairs they were playing disco, and downstairs I heard Rock Lobster by the B-52s. And I said, that's Yoko? I thought there was 2 records going at once or something, because I thought it was so her. I thought this person studied her. I said, get the axe out, call the wife. Gee, have you heard this?
The B-52s released their second album 13 months later, August 1980's Wild Planet, helped by having most of the tracks written before their first. Both albums soon went gold in the US. Tracks like Rock Lobster, Planet Claire and Private Idaho were getting a fair share of play on college radio.
Some say she's from Mars, or one of the 7 stars.
You're living in your own private Idaho. You're living in your own private Idaho.
Rock Lobster making the UK top 40 and number 1 in Canada. But as the band's out there visuals were such a big part of their appeal, they saw any opportunity to get themselves on TV. Pre-MTV, their options were limited. Most surprising was their appearance on daytime soap The Guiding Light in 1982, their wigs coexisting between betrayals and melodrama. However, Saturday Night Live 2 years earlier, in January 1980, was where most people saw them first, playing through Rock Lobster and Dance This Mess Around. Appalling host Terry Garr, and spellbinding a teenage Kurt Cobain and Dave Grohl. They looked so otherworldly, but that was only partially by design. I remember Saturday Night Live. One thing is that Ricky suggested that none of us smile. Not that we were ever going to smile, because we were so nervous. The nervousness translated into this sort of attitude when people saw us. I think we looked very alien. People were like, where are they from? Athens could have been Mars to a lot of people. We didn't smile or seem relaxed, so our dancing was really stiff, and our faces had this punk attitude. So really it was a nervous default. It wasn't anything we tried to put on. By 1982 they were a big deal, having built high on that year's US Festival. However, critics were quick to dismiss the band as a novelty act, while their sense of humour was on full display in both their stage attire and their songs. They were very serious about their art, but it was hard for some to see through the miasma of wackiness. Their manager, Gary Kurfürst, felt the band should change their sound to avoid pigeonholing, and tapped Talking Head David Byrne to produce what would become 1982's Mesopotamia.
There's a lot of ruins in Mesopotamia.
A combination of time constraints and Kurfürst's impatience turned the LP into an EP, and the finished product sounded more like their producer's band than their own.
Lay down the law. 6 or 8.
1983's Whammy got the band heading back in the right direction, now experimenting more so with synthesizers and drum machines. A particular highlight was Song for a Future Generation,
Wanna be the captain of the Enterprise. Wanna be the king of the Zulu.
where the band took the astrological introductions conceit of the floaters float on for their own.
Libra. And my name is Charles.
Hello, I'm Susie, I'm a Pisces, and I like chihuahuas and Chinese noodles.
Especially as it gave Ricky and Strickland rare moments in the vocal spotlight. But sales-wise, these releases couldn't compare with their first 2. Their next album would take almost 2 years to complete, the band dangerously in love with the programming perfectionism of the CMI Fairlight. It was the first time in their career that their label actively asked them to go back and write a hit, resulting in the quirky, purposely groaning-inducing Wig.
Ray bought his hairpiece at the thrift store, you know why? Why? 'Cause he didn't want to pay.
The process was particularly stressful for Ricky, who wrote most of the band's music, with most of his bandmates unaware he was seriously ill. We saw Ricky get thin and asked, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Oh, I stopped eating Mexican food." He loved Mexican food. One day he didn't show up for rehearsal. Keith called me the next day and said, "Ricky's in the hospital and he might die. It was the most shocking thing. It seemed as though we, particularly Cindy, would never get over it. Looking back, we were in denial. We thought something was wrong, but we never dreamed he would suddenly die. Ricky Wilson died on the 12th of October 1985 from AIDS-related complications. He was 32. He was one of the earliest celebrity deaths of the disease, 10 days after Rock Hudson, and public awareness of AIDS was still low. Warner released their fifth album, Bouncing Off the Satellites, in September 1986, 11 months later. The band, still grief-stricken, was in no state to promote the album, did few interviews, and did not tour. Fun time dance party rock and roll was not what they were feeling. They had lost their friend, their brother, the driving force of their band, and felt this might be the end of the B-52s. Because of lack of promotion, Bouncing Off the Satellites sold the worst of any B-52s album. The band, heartbroken and grieving, were also on the verge of bankruptcy, but in their absence, events transpired that encouraged the group to get back together. In 1986, Rock Lobster was re-released in the UK and got to number 12. And then, in June 1988, they were invited to play an event for PETA in Washington, D.C., but still too shell-shocked. They instead hosted. But the response, being in front of a crowd excited to see them once more, motivated them towards trying again. In the years since the hiatus, Strickland had moved to Woodstock, to a cabin by a lake, Pearson renting a place a 5-minute canoe trip away. As a means to continue Ricky's spirit, he started writing music, though with no ambition of commerciality or even release. And though no one could play guitar like Ricky, Strickland was best suited to trying. I visited Kate and Cindy in New York and played a cassette for them of some music I was working on. Soon after that, we all discussed and agreed to try writing together again. We took a year to write Cosmic Thing. We spent a lot of days just talking, which was an essential part of the creative process for us. It was healing. We became our own support group. I wasn't sure if we could do it without Ricky. We knew it was going to be a different band without him, and we had to find out what that was. One of the most important tracks for reuniting the group was Deadbeat Club.
We would talk every day for hours.
Rather than a tear-stained why and unfeeling universe, they fondly remembered the old days, before Rock Lobster, a pack of misfits hanging out, dancing the night away, and getting kicked out of bars.
Dance in the garden and torn sheets in the rain.
Their found family in Athens, Georgia, broke but free. Its title what they lovingly called themselves.
Here they come, the members of a deadbeat club.
Here they also bring up skinny dipping as something they used to do back in the day.
Go skinny dipping in the moonlight.
And one can't help but recall R.E.M's later song, Night Swimming.
Night swimming deserves a quiet night.
As both bands are from Athens, Georgia and moved in similar circles, does it mean Michael Stipe and the B-52s indulged together? As for who was going to produce this comeback album, many names were thrown around, but the decision wasn't made by the band. Pearson gave the choice over to the Spirit Realm and her psychic, Elaine Alt. Now Elaine doesn't know anything about music producers, not a clue. I read to her the names of about 12, and she kept coming back with, "Who's this Nile Rodgers?" I'd say, "But what about so-and-so?" No, she'd say. The spirit guides say no. But the spirit guides just love this Nile. Who is this Nile? So we decided to wait for Nile, even though he was booked up for 6 months. Meanwhile, we recorded some songs with Don Watts, who we'd met and liked, and the spirit guides favoured him too. As well as having been instrumental and chic, in the 80s, Nile Rodgers had made Bowie MTV ready on Let's Dance. And consolidated Madonna's career on Like a Virgin. Don Was hadn't yet hit his stride as a producer. Mostly he was known for his group Was Not Was, and their 1987 hit, Walk the Dinosaur. And while Rodgers was behind the desk for the majority of the album, its biggest hit was produced by Was.
Love shack, yeah.
The title of Love Shack was Fred's idea, though some of the lines in the song are about my place that I lived in for $15 a month, in the middle of a field with goats. But Fred was thinking of this place called the Hawaiian Hali, a juke joint out in the country, primarily African American, but students would go there, and it would play great soul music. The Love Shack is a fictitious place, but the whole idea is that everyone's welcome to the party. At the time of first playing it to their producer, it wasn't quite done. The band felt they had a hit on their hands, but it was a rambling 6-minute long jam with no discernible chorus. Woz and Pearson picked out a phrase from another demo and made it the hook. Overall, Love Shack is a celebration of life, of good times and togetherness, boisterous, but a much needed remedy of their recent tragedy. The song also benefits from a rehearsal mistake. When we were jamming on Love Shack, some of the instrumentation was pre-recorded, and all of a sudden it stopped, just as Cindy was full throttle yelling, the tape had stopped, but she kept going, and that's actually how we got that part. It wasn't planned, it just happened. The unaccompanied full throttle yell from Cindy is often misheard. Some have interpreted it as Cindy revealing she's pregnant, perhaps due to being prefaced by Snyder's flabbergasted, "You're what?" But simply, there are just a lot of tin roofs in rural Georgia. The album Cosmic Thing was released in June 1989. The conservation-themed first single, Channel Z, got them back on college radio. But they had to beg radio stations to play Love Shack. The fear was it was too weird, too long, too B-52s. But once the house party video was in circulation on MTV, the track started climbing up the charts, ending up at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. And number 2 in the UK. Third single, the more introspective Rome, was also a number 3 smash in the US. No longer fringe weirdos, the B-52s were certified pop stars. Both Love Shack and Rome would end up getting nominated for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group at the 1990 and 91 Grammys respectively, both years losing out to Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville. But Snyder rejected the pop accusations. Surely there was still a college rock alternative act. By 1991, college rock was pop, and Cosmic Thing and the B-52s were defining factors that firmly pushed it into the charts, as well as a massive touring around the world over the next couple of years. Kate Pearson had time to record a couple of high-profile guest spots. Iggy Pop's Candy in 1990, and helping fellow Athenian college rockers gone mainstream, R.E.M., to get their first UK top 10 single with Shiny Happy People in 1991. I always thought that they wrote that song about the B-52s, but Michael Stipe denied it, saying it's really about Chinese revolutionaries and those propaganda posters of shiny happy people. Okay then, Love Shack is really about the plight of tenant farmers in Georgia. The interband appreciation between the B-52s and R.E.M. is strong, because the B-52s had gone out and paved the way for them. On early tours, Stipe would tell crowds, "We're R.E.M. from Athens, Georgia." There was pride in that place because of the B-52s. And a collection of bands from their hometown were also inspired by their be-yourself and do-it-yourself ethos. Pylon, Love Tractor, and later, of Montreal.
Small town.
our celebrations.
The B-52s also encouraged REM that signing to their label, Warner Brothers, was a solid decision, a move that helped push alternative rock further into the mainstream. But their influence goes way beyond the town where they were formed. For Scissor Sisters' Jake Shears hearing Love Shack at age 12, it was the first time he'd heard an unmistakably gay man on the radio. As much as Fred Snyder didn't come out to the public until 1992, he did nothing to obscure his truth. And that goes for the rest of the band as well. Out of the original 5 members, only Cindy Wilson identifies as heterosexual. What was often dismissed as campy or kitsch was just them being themselves. Because of this, the B-52s became a beacon for those that didn't fit in with heteronormativity. Songs like 1979's There's a Moon in the Sky Called the Moon, making many feel seen and safe.
Don't feel out of place, 'cause there are thousands of others like you.
Not until 1992 did someone ask us about being gay. It was almost more subversive that we didn't talk about it. We were just trying to be ourselves. Being gay was just a part of it. That's really how we wanted the world to be, you know? You just do your thing and your sexual orientation is just a part of it. I think it was kind of more revolutionary because of that. People either related to us on that level or they didn't. Some people got it, some people didn't. But we certainly never tried to hide it at all. Our music and our image kind of stood for itself. That was the statement. And we weren't really self-aware enough to think we needed to say anything else about it. We were saying it was okay to be different, by just living it. The Wilson siblings have their own impressive imprints. Cindy's adoption of Yoko Ono's primal screams within a punk-adjacent context. Her hiccups and shrieks on something like Hero Worship. Would transfer over to Riot Girl and Dance Punk. The echoes of Ricky's guitar work can be found in the surf guitar plus punk rock of the Dirt Bombs and the Offspring.
I can't stop thinking about it.
His punky, dancey grooves audible in Bush Tetris, ESG, Liquid Liquid, and Groove is in the Heart.
You can't be funky, you can't be funky if you haven't got a soul. I want to dance. Groove is in the heart. Groove is in the heart.
As well as the complementary dual guitar interplay of Deer Hunter and Slater Kinney. The latter have even collaborated with Fred Snyder, covering the pseudo-title track from Hedwig and the Angry Inch in 2003.
It was an angry 6 inches forward and 5 inches back.
Slater Kinney have also performed Rock Lobster in a live setting with Carrie Brownstein's Portlandia co-star, Fred Armisen. Do you know who else has covered Rock Lobster? Mathcore pioneers Botch. But aside from all that, artists as diverse as Madonna, Steve Albini, LCD Soundsystem, and the Bangles have expressed how important the band were to them. To me, they were like an art project. They took influences from the 60s, the Ventures and the Johnny Rivers Secret Agent Man riff, but didn't follow any rules. The girls singing felt transforming and magical. On our earliest releases, before we signed to Columbia, you can really hear their influence. After touring Cosmic Thing, Cindy Wilson would leave the B-52s to start a family, so wouldn't be part of their next album, 1992's Good Stuff. On tour being replaced by Twin Peaks theme songstress, Julie Cruz. Cindy returned in 1984, but significantly was not present for when the B-52s covered the original TV theme for the Flintstones movie the same year. Since then they have released one album, 2008's Funplex, but mostly have endured as an unbeatable live act, earning with aplomb their self-imposed title of World's Best Party Band. And that's who they are, and what made them so great. When interviewed for the T. Cole Rachel piece on the band for the Pitchfork Review, Michael Stipe summed it up perfectly. One of the best things about the B-52s was that they made it okay to dance. In punk spaces before, if you wanted to express yourself with movement, you'd be pogoing or moshing. It was cathartic but violent and threatening. Not everyone felt safe to join in. There was a sense of exclusion. The B-52s said everyone was welcome. No matter your gender, your sexuality, whatever you look like, everyone gets to dance. Their music was about getting people together, whether at a sea life beset beach party or some kind of love shack. Everyone is invited. Thanks for watching. So, Rock Lobster or Love Shack? What do you think? Comment down below. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and why don't you also maybe watch another one? There's many other alternative Pioneer videos. You should check them out. If you want to support the channel and make sure quality videos like this continue to get made, maybe think about contributing to my Patreon. Rewards include additional playlists, watching new videos a day early, and getting your name at the end of every video. Thanks to all who already support me, and I'll see you in a few weeks' time for a dip into 90s music television.